The Young and the Restless spoilers Monday, full February 24, 2025. In the simmering depths of Genoa City's turbulent underworld, whispers and rumors had become the currency of power and despair. For weeks now, voices in hushed corridors and secretive phone calls had spread a scandalous tale. Phyllis was missing, and the rumor mill churned with dark allegations that she was not only alive but also involved in a twisted scheme to kidnap Sharon and mete out brutal punishment. This rumor, like a venomous shadow, seeped into every conversation, casting doubt on the once revered matriarch of the Newman dynasty. Yet beneath the swirl of conjecture lay a more profound truth: the rumors were false. Phyllis, far from being the mastermind of cruelty, was, in fact, ensnared in a web of circumstances that made her the true victim of the city's relentless intrigue. The heart of the matter was complex. The painful memory of Heather's tragic and untimely death still hung heavily over everyone who knew her. While some lamented the loss with sorrow and regret, others insisted that the tragedy was now behind them, a closed chapter that should not cast its long, mournful shadow over the present. Even as tears of grief were shed and whispers of what might have been echoed in darkened rooms, the insistence was clear: Heather was gone, and there was no turning back. In this context, the narrative surrounding Phyllis took on a dissonant note. Although many claimed that Phyllis had orchestrated heinous acts against Sharon in retaliation or punishment, the reality was far more sympathetic. Phyllis was desperate to overcome the relentless tide of misfortune that had engulfed her life, but the burden was too heavy to bear. Every day, Phyllis was tormented by the sight of her children's suffering, a piercing reminder of the family bonds that had once been her greatest source of strength. The absence of her beloved wife, whose memory was etched into the very fabric of her soul, compounded the relentless ache in her heart. In the wake of Heather's death, Daniel had crumbled under the weight of his grief. His once resolute demeanor had given way to a state of despair, rendering him incapable of taking any meaningful action. In the midst of this personal tragedy, it became clear that the vicious rumors circulating about Phyllis were nothing more than a cruel misrepresentation of her plight. Instead of being the orchestrator of chaos, she was being painted as a villain when, in fact, she was ensnared in a labyrinth of betrayal and misfortune, a victim of circumstances far beyond her control. While the city's elite struggled with these heart-wrenching familial dilemmas, a parallel drama unfolded in the private lives of those entangled in love and rivalry. Claire, still seething with anger from the recent betrayals, had reached her breaking point. The provocative and calculated hug that Summer had shared with Kyle, a gesture loaded with both challenge and seduction, had ignited a blazing inferno of fury within her. Claire's response was as swift as it was decisive. She dispatched a stern warning to both Kyle and Summer, demanding an explanation for their actions. "Why would you both act in such a manner?" she demanded, her words echoing with the finality of a judge's gavel. For Claire, this act of defiance was not merely a reaction to a moment of betrayal, it was the prelude to a calculated vendetta. She was determined to see Summer's ambitions, and the threat she posed to the love she so dearly cherished, crushed beneath the weight of her own resolve. In her mind, as long as Summer existed, the chance for Kyle's undivided affection would remain forever out of reach. And so, in the midst of her simmering rage, Claire began plotting a series of machinations designed to obliterate the very dreams that Summer had dared to chase. Yet, amid the personal storms and tangled affections, another deadly plot was taking shape behind the closed doors of power. In a clandestine meeting that would shake the very foundations of Genoa City, Jack and Diane convened to discuss a future that was as dark as it was inevitable. Their conversation, shrouded in secrecy and steely determination, centered on a single, explosive objective: the elimination of Victor. To them, Victor's unyielding ambition and his ruthless pursuit of power were the root causes of every disaster that had befallen their intertwined lives. Diane, a woman known for her formidable strength and audacious resolve, proposed a plan so radical that it sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to listen. "If Victor is allowed to live, his influence will continue to poison every facet of our lives," she declared with unbridled conviction. In her eyes, Eliminating him was not only a necessity for ending the cycle of betrayal and corruption but also a means to liberate Jack from the shackles that kept him from pursuing a future with Nikki, a future free from the toxic influence of Victor's machinations. It was a proposal that promised a radical transformation of power dynamics, yet it was fraught with peril, for the consequences of such an act could ripple across the delicate fabric of the city's social order. As these multifaceted dramas converged, the residents of Genoa City found themselves at a crossroads, where every decision carried the weight of irrevocable consequences. The false rumors about Phyllis had added yet another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. In reality, Phyllis was not the villain she was portrayed to be, rather, she was a casualty of the city's relentless pursuit of power, caught in the crossfire of accusations and deceit. Her struggle was one of survival, a desperate attempt to reclaim her dignity and mend the fractured bonds of her family. Meanwhile, Claire's bitter quest for retribution against Summer was intensifying, fueled by a mix of jealousy, anger, and a fierce determination to secure the love of Kyle for herself. The war of words and willpower between the two women had become a spectacle that drew the gaze of the entire city, a stark reminder that in Genoa City, personal vendettas could ignite into full-blown conflicts with far-reaching consequences. Amid the chaos, Kyle remained a silent observer, his heart and mind locked in a turbulent battle between duty and desire. Torn between his lingering affection for Claire and the magnetic pull of Summer's provocative charm, he found himself paralyzed by indecision. Every glance, every touch, every whispered promise was a reminder of the fragile nature of trust, a trust that had been shattered by betrayal and wounded by ambition. The very act of choosing now seemed like an insurmountable challenge, for the stakes were higher than ever before. His internal struggle was not just a matter of personal preference, it was a poignant reflection of the broader crisis engulfing Genoa City, where alliances were as transient as the morning mist and love was as unpredictable as the wind. In this charged atmosphere of suspicion, heartache, and imminent danger, the destiny of each character hung in the balance. The false allegations about Phyllis, the relentless grief over Heather's death, Claire's vengeful plotting, and the lethal conspiracy to kill Victor, all these threads wove together into a tapestry of intrigue and turmoil. The city, with all its glittering facades and dark undercurrents, was a stage where every whispered rumor and every calculated move had the power to reshape lives, fracture loyalties, and redefine the course of history. As the night deepened and the murmur of conspiracies grew louder, one truth became inescapable: the fate of Genoa City was intertwined with the fates of its most tormented souls. Phyllis, the unwitting victim of false narratives, clung to the hope of overcoming her insurmountable grief even as her children's suffering and her own loneliness threatened to consume her. Claire's determination to eradicate Summer's influence was a desperate bid to reclaim a love that seemed to be slipping away with every passing moment. And in the shadowed halls of power, Jack and Diane's deadly plan to assassinate Victor loomed as a potential catalyst for a seismic shift in the balance of power, a move that could either liberate them from a lifetime of subjugation or plunge them into a vortex of unforeseen consequences. In the end, as the city's inhabitants prepared themselves for the inevitable storm, the intricate dance of ambition, betrayal, and redemption continued unabated. Every whispered rumor, every act of vengeance, and every moment of despair was a reminder that in Genoa City, survival depended not only on the strength of one's convictions but also on the willingness to navigate the perilous waters of love and retribution. And as each character braced for the next twist in this relentless saga, one question remained at the forefront. In a world where loyalty was fleeting and trust was a luxury, who would emerge victorious, and at what cost? In the dim light of a somber afternoon, the long-overdue reunion of Amy and Damien sparked a storm of unresolved emotions and bitter memories. The tension between them was palpable, their words charged with the pain of a past that neither dared to confront until now. Every exchanged glance and every harsh syllable in their argument seemed to dredge up wounds that had festered for years. The air in the room was thick with the weight of unsaid apologies and the regret of missed opportunities, as the ghosts of old grievances cast long shadows over the present. Amy, once a vibrant woman full of hope and gentle laughter, now wore the unmistakable mark of suffering. Diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer, she faced each day with a bravery that belied the grim prognosis whispered among those who knew her story. Despite her frailty, the pain of the past still ignited sparks of anger in her eyes whenever she looked at Damien. For her, the years of separation had been a slow, unbearable erosion of the maternal bond that she had longed to preserve. Every unresolved word, every harsh silence, now resonated with a deeper sorrow that no treatment or tender care could fully soothe. Damien, on the other hand, carried his own heavy burdens. The years apart from his mother had not been kind, and the pain of their estrangement had hardened his heart. His pride had become a barrier, preventing him from approaching Amy with the vulnerability that reconciliation required. Every time he tried to justify the silence and distance between them, his words came out as brittle defenses, masking a guilt that he struggled to acknowledge even to himself. Their confrontation, which began as a clash of anger and accusation, soon evolved into an excruciating reminder of what might have been, a future where healing was possible, but now seemed tragically out of reach. Amid this heated encounter, Nate emerged as a desperate, yet steadfast, mediator. Having witnessed the scars that time and absence had etched into both Amy and Damien, Nate knew that reconciliation was not merely a wish, it was an urgent necessity. His own heart ached for the possibility of a reunion, of a chance for both mother and son to mend the ruptures of their shared history. Determined to break through the barricades of resentment and pride, Nate's voice rang out, carrying both a plea for empathy and a fierce admonition. "Damien, listen to me." Nate bellowed, his tone echoing with both desperation and authority. His eyes, glistening with unshed tears, locked onto Damien's as he continued, "Look around you, Amy is suffering. She's fighting cancer, and every day that passes brings her closer to the end. If she were to die tomorrow, would you really be happy? Would you be content knowing that you never had the chance to reconcile with the only person who ever loved you unconditionally?" His words cut through the room like a knife, the raw emotion in his voice exposing the painful truth that both had long avoided confronting. For a moment, the room fell silent. The gravity of Nate's outburst hung in the air, a stark reminder of the fragile time that remained for Amy. Damien's eyes flickered with a tumult of conflicting emotions, anger, regret, and a dawning realization of what his stubborn silence might cost them all. It was as if Nate had forced him to look into a mirror that reflected the true consequences of years spent apart. Amy, frail yet resolute, trembled at the edge of despair, her eyes silently pleading for the connection that had long been severed. In that charged moment, the past and the present collided with heartbreaking intensity. Nate's words, though harsh, were a clarion call for redemption, a call that resonated with the truth that time was a luxury none of them could afford. The room, once filled with the bitter echoes of old arguments, now pulsed with the urgency of lost chances and the hope for a future mended by forgiveness. Yet, even as the seeds of reconciliation were sown in that crucible of pain, the wounds ran deep. The scars of years of separation and the bitterness of unresolved conflicts could not be healed with words alone. For Damien, the path to absolution was shrouded in the complexities of his own regrets and the formidable task of dismantling the walls he had so meticulously built around his heart. For Amy, the fight against cancer was paralleled by an internal battle, a struggle to summon the strength to forgive, even as the relentless march of her illness threatened to silence her voice forever. Nate, standing as the reluctant arbiter between past and present, continued to plead for a moment of vulnerability from both sides. "You both have endured so much," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of years of sorrow and hope. "There's no time to let pride or past mistakes define your future. Amy needs you, and you need her. Think of what could be salvaged if you let go of the anger, if you allowed the possibility of forgiveness to take root." The confrontation reached its zenith as the trio stood on the precipice of irreversible loss. Every heartbeat was a reminder that the clock was ticking, a relentless countdown towards a future where the chance for reconciliation might vanish forever. Nate's fervent appeal was not just for the sake of healing old wounds, it was a desperate bid to preserve the last vestiges of a bond that had once been unbreakable. His words were imbued with the haunting question that gnawed at the conscience of everyone present. Would Amy be able to close her eyes in peace, knowing that she had not found the reconciliation she so desperately sought with her only son? For a long, agonizing moment, silence reigned. The room, heavy with the implications of Nate's words, seemed to shrink around them, each of them acutely aware of the precious time slipping away. The future was uncertain, the outcome of this fragile reunion shrouded in the unpredictable interplay of love, regret, and the inexorable passage of time. In the midst of the turmoil, the echoes of their shared past and the weight of unspoken apologies converged, creating a poignant tableau of what might be lost if the wounds were not finally healed. In that stillness, the fate of their relationship hung in the balance, a delicate equilibrium between the agony of regret and the promise of redemption. Nate's impassioned plea had laid bare the stark reality. Without reconciliation, the lingering bitterness would ultimately doom them all to a future of sorrow and unfulfilled longing. The confrontation had forced each of them to confront not only their shared past but also the unforgiving truth that life, with its fleeting moments and irreversible losses, would not grant them a second chance once Amy's time had run out. As the afternoon gave way to the deepening shadows of twilight, the promise of a new beginning remained fragile and uncertain. In that singular, charged moment, each heart was left to decide, would they embrace the painful but necessary path of forgiveness and healing, or would the ghosts of the past continue to dictate the terms of their future? The answer lay not in the words spoken, but in the silent choices that each would soon have to make, a choice that could either bind them together in a final, heartfelt reconciliation or leave them forever adrift in a sea of regret and unspoken sorrow. Thus, as the last rays of sunlight faded and the somber night settled over Genoa City, the echoes of Nate's impassioned cries lingered in the cool air, a reminder that in the face of inevitable loss, the time to mend broken bonds was now, before it was too late for any of them to find solace in the embrace of reconciliation. In the tangled web of Genoa City's latest intrigues, a sinister subplot was unfolding that threatened to shatter the already fragile alliances among its inhabitants. At the heart of this new storm was the toxic relationship between Holdem and Audra, a union defined not by passion or mutual respect but by manipulation, deceit, and a dangerous game of power. Their connection was as volatile as it was destructive, a dark mirror reflecting the worst aspects of ambition and betrayal in a city where loyalty was a currency in short supply. Audra, once considered a trusted confidant of Nate, had gradually revealed a hidden agenda. No longer was she the loyal ally everyone believed her to be. Instead, behind her charming smile and calculated glances lay the cold determination to chart her own escape from Genoa City, a city teeming with schemers, broken promises, and a relentless pursuit of power at any cost. Audra's eyes, once filled with hope and the promise of a new beginning, had now hardened with the resolve of someone who intended to sever all ties with the past. She was meticulously planning her exit strategy, a daring escape that would take her far away from the treacherous corridors of Genoa City, where she had become entangled in a web of conspiracies and double crosses. Yet, amidst this unfolding drama, Nate remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in his immediate periphery. Preoccupied with the emotional reconciliation between Damien and Amy, a desperate bid to mend a family torn apart by years of estrangement and heartache, Nate's attention was wholly absorbed by the fragile process of healing old wounds. He was convinced that if he could just bridge the gap between a mother and her estranged son, everything else would eventually fall into place. This noble yet consuming pursuit of familial reconciliation, however, came at a steep price. It left him dangerously inattentive to the insidious machinations taking place right under his nose. Holdem, a consummate swindler with a reputation for weaving intricate scams and manipulating those who trusted him, had been lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to exploit Nate's distracted state. His relationship with Audra, already steeped in toxicity, provided the ideal cover for his fraudulent activities. Together, they spun a web of deceit so intricate that only the most vigilant would suspect foul play. While Nate believed that his focus on reuniting a fractured family was the paramount task of the moment, he inadvertently overlooked the fact that Holdem was a master at deception, an individual whose ulterior motives were as dark as the midnight alleys of Genoa City. Unbeknownst to Nate, another pair of vigilant eyes had been closely monitoring the disruptive duo. Devon and Lily, two of Genoa City's most perceptive and principled figures, had sensed that something was terribly amiss with Holdem and Audra's alliance. With their innate ability to cut through the haze of gossip and artifice, they had begun a quiet investigation into the pair's activities. Their instincts told them that Audra's loyalties had shifted, and not for the better.